battle raged for about 2 hours that afternoon, off in the distance and coming back. But they didn't know that the man in charge at the time, Green Clay, at the fort here, had received information the night before that the reinforcements had been held up and probably wouldn't be here for another week. He had that information available to him, but the next day, trying to convince the men inside the fort, actually nothing happening in the woods itself was very difficult for him to do. In fact, he faced a great deal of insubordination among the men who wanted to get into the battle. The Indians hoped that to draw the troops outside of the fort, they could swarm in behind them, cut off the retreat back to the fort, and decimate the troops here. After about 2 hours of fighting out in the woods, one of the heaviest rainstorms that the men had seen here prior to that, they said the skies just opened up and it was just a horrendous, terrible storm, and you couldn't hardly see anything. Well, black powder doesn't work real well in heavy rains. So once the rain started coming, the Indians realized that the troops were not going to be lured into the battle, so they just broke off the battle and moved away. So the second siege really didn't amount to much other than what we call a sham battle. The Indians, realizing now that they couldn't take Fort Meigs, decided that there was another fort in the general area here that would maybe be easier pickings, and that was where present-day Fremont as Fort Stevenson was there. Fort Stevenson was a much smaller fort and was only garrisoned by about 100 men. Harrison had given a gentleman named George Cron the directives that if the fort was attacked, if he felt that the fort was being attacked, going to be attacked, to just leave the fort and come back here to the safety of Fort Meigs, because that fort was not risk the men. Cron wanted to get a feather in his cap, so when the British arrived there with their native allies, they had one iron 6-pound cannon which they put to use very effectively. The large number of troops of the British and Indians who tried to attack the fort, the waves were repulsed time after time, and in the ditches around the fort, there was probably as many as 100 British troops that lay dead in those trenches after the battle was called off. Once the British and Indians realized that they couldn't kill Stevenson as well, they just packed up their belongings again and headed back up to Fort Malden. Nothing much happened beyond that. Harrison was gathering all his men again and everything for his planned attack on Canada. By late August, early September, or by late August, things were pretty much in place. Harrison had all his men. The only thing he needed now was transportation, and that was up to Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry, his new fleet on Lake Erie. So in early September of 1813, Harrison found that Perry's fleet had sailed and had engaged the British and had beat the British on the Battle of Lake Erie. Once Perry had succeeded in establishing control of Lake Erie, he sent a letter back here to Harrison informing him that the British had been defeated and the lakes were under United States control. Once Harrison had that information available to him, men left here and went up to where Old Fort, Ohio is today, and encamped there, and Perry was able to get them all on his ship and take them over to near Fort Malden. This was, by that time, it was early October, and on October 5th, the Americans, after the British had already left Fort Malden and tried to retreat back, pursued by the Americans on October 5th of 1813, the Americans caught up with Colonel Proctor and his men, what we call the Battle of the Thames near Chatham, Ontario. The battle itself only lasted about 20 to 30 minutes, but it was a battle that changed the entire history of this area. Up until that time, the Indians were under the leadership of a man called Tecumseh, who was trying to put together a huge Indian ship that extended all the way from Florida to Michigan and as far west as the Dakotas, trying to get all the tribes together to stand as one. Tecumseh was killed at that battle. Once the leadership was gone, the native backbone was broken, and there was nobody that had the charisma to get them to fight again as strongly as they had in the past. So on October 5th of 1813, on September 5th of 1813, at the Battle of the Thames, essentially the war in the West was over. Most of the troops that were stationed here were sent eastward to what we call the Meigs region. The fort itself, as you see it today, standing on 10 acres, was only here for about 7 months. It was tore down. The smaller stockade over in the northwest corner where you came in today was constructed. It was simply 4 small block houses, 50 yards square, and garrisoned by 100 men. They were here just as support. By early 1850, the war had ended. This fort was decommissioned, and it went into ruin. Many of the locals came in here and just scavenged whatever wood and everything was left. Some of it was burnt down, and some of it was probably used for building structures in the area as the residents started to move back in. As you can see off in the distance, the redcoats have been brought back out onto the field. The Americans have taken over the artillery pieces. You can see off to the right of the Americans we have some of the light infantry that have broken off, and they're trying to make sure that the British come in and flank the American troops and cut them off from that front. Some people quite often wonder why Fort Meigs itself was actually built here even. But if you understand transportation at the time, everything was on water routes. These trails and roads were not constructed at the time. And everything, all goods had to be moved through the water routes. And quite literally, the easiest water route to get somebody to get supplies here from, let's say, Pittsburgh, was go down the Ohio River, go around southern Ohio, back up into Indiana, up the Wabash River, into the Maumee River basin, and bring the things all the way around the strait. The British actually had control of the lake, so it wasn't easy to bring supplies across the lake. They actually had to float things all the way around. The other thing is if you look at the waterways of the area, if you look at the St. Lawrence Seaway coming down through the Great Lakes and everything, all of that ends pretty much here at this point. From this point on the Maumee River, if you were to take the Maumee River up to Fort Wayne, Indiana, very short, to what we call the Wabash River. The Wabash River runs down into the Ohio River, which runs down the Mississippi River. So